Hey everybody, it's me, Queen PR, and we're back with this very special bonus episode. I wanted to take a look back on the Raw Women's Championship. It is very pivotal in the history of WWE Women's Division. It was the end of the Divas title. It was ushered in the quote unquote women's evolution and just a more competitive championship scene in general in WWE. So I wanted to take a look back on that history, but also I wanted to do it with one of my favorite people and a part of the fan club crew, those Wrestling Girls Universe family. Hi, you know what? I'm going to let him introduce himself because he's very well known.
Wow, well known? I don't know about all that. I'm just me.
I heard the H stands for Hollywood. That's all I'm saying.
It does not. Like I tell people all the time, I can still go in the grocery store and not be harassed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have 10,000 followers on Twitter. So, With that crazy, that's how we measure success.
That is crazy. That's the world that we live in. But I am very happy to have you on this bonus episode.
Thank you, Miss Queen PR. It's always a pleasure to create content with you. I was telling you before we hit the record button, it kind of reminds me of the first time I joined the Patreon. I should say, first time I joined you on an episode hosted by your platform on Patreon, when we was just sitting around texting on a Saturday, and you was like, "You want to create content?" I'm like, "Sure," and boom, here we are, and just like another one of those days.
It really was one of those days, and I'm excited for everything happening in wrestling right now. It's a very exciting time. So I wanted to kind of, get reflective real quick as we move on to this new phase. And the Raw Women's Championship, it was announced in 2016 by Lita ahead of WrestleMania 32, 2016. This was an interesting time. It was the first Mania, I think, after Sasha, Naomi, and Becky. No, I'm sorry. Sasha, Charlotte, and Becky came up. The first time the women were on the card, and it was a triple threat match that I think everyone knew this was going to be different. This was going to turn the tide. How did you feel? Because, I wasn't watching it regularly back at this time, but I know you were. How did it feel when Lita announced that? Did you see it coming? And what were you looking forward to?
I was excited. And just because I know somebody out there is going to try to say, "Oh, it was on the card." So it was on the card the year before in a tag team match, but it wasn't a championship match. And, WrestleMania 30, the match was rushed. You know what I mean? But this was the first time, like you said, where in a while that the title was on the line, and it was as a big deal. They were given time. Many people will say they stole the show. I was excited that they was changing the championship name. I didn't hate the Divas title, but to me, it meant when you're saying we're having a women's revolution, it felt like the final thing that was going to make us take the division seriously. Because me being a fan of Alundra Blaze and her run when she was facing Bull Nakano, when she was facing Lonnie Kai, WrestleMania 10, and when she was facing Bertha Faye, those matches, they were seen as special attractions because you didn't get women's wrestling every pay-per-view or women's wrestling every Raw for that matter. But it did feel like a special attraction because it was a women's championship match. And that's how I felt like, okay, they're going back to the name. I'm excited. As far as the belt design, I said, okay, I see what they were doing. They was going to try to make it as equivalent to the men. And from the public relations standpoint, I see that they wanted to showcase, hey, when women win championships, this is what we're going to hand them. We're looking at 2016. So full disclosure, you're coming off of a year prior when the United States soccer team won the World Cup, the women's team, that is. You're looking at the WNBA when Minnesota Lynx are on their run, led by Maya Moore. So you're looking at all these great things happening in women's sports, and WWE wants to be a part of that. So now they'll be handing the women's championship. Not to mention, UConn basketball was in the middle of their run where they were winning. I think they went 88-0 before they lost.
Wow.
So it's the same thing they were doing with the men. Now you're going to start to see them doing that with the women. So I understood why it looked that way.
And just looking at this beautiful graphic of Ronda Rousey holding the Raw Women's Championship, and she was a part of that movement during the time that you're talking about. So for her to then, all those years later, hold this championship is pretty, it's a big deal. Another, you talked about the name change. This is when women were now referred to as superstars on the same playing field as the men instead of divas. Although I can do a whole Patreon on my opinion of the word divas. I don't think it's as big a slight as a lot of wrestling fans try to make it seem. That word had a lot of strength at that time, especially after, Beyonce released her song. So I think it was empowering at one point, but I do understand how, things were changing. Female athletes were being looked at in a different way, and WWE had to kind of be a part of that. So changing the title, making the matches more competitive, bringing the 3 of the 4 horsewomen up was absolutely the right call. So let's look at lineage really quickly and look at the championship by the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So our first champion was Charlotte Flair. She won it. She came into WrestleMania 32 as the Divas champion and left as the WWE Women's champion. And our last champion we know is Asuka. These numbers, this championship hasn't been around that long, if you think about it.
Yeah, that's true.
And it has a lot of history, a lot of reigns that define it. And we'll get into some of the most notable reigns and feuds. I do want to give it up to Bianca. She held the championship for 420 days. She made history. I don't even remember how many records she broke. I know she had the longest Raw reign. She was the longest reign of any, I think, Black woman in WWE.
Mm-hmm.
So she definitely did that. She walked into WrestleManias with it. I think that was definitely one of the most notable reigns. We'll get into Nikki A.S.H, who only held it for 33 days. It felt longer than that.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. And then, of course, Becky Lynch holding it for the most combined days. She actually held it along with the SmackDown Women's Championship. We'll get into that. And I don't think, to anyone's surprise, Charlotte Flair held it the most times at 6. I think we talked about it earlier, but how many Raw Women's champions in total were there?
11.
11. Wow. So just looking at the women that held this title, what is one that sticks out to you the most? What feud sticks out to you the most?
Oh, that's tough. So I was a huge fan, honestly, of the Sasha Charlotte feud in the beginning. I know a lot of people hated when they felt they were playing hot potato with the belt. But I loved it, to be honest with you. I loved the way that, so it was a time period between July and November, right? Actually, July and December. Sasha would beat Charlotte to win her first title. Then Charlotte would get it back. Sasha would get it back. Then Charlotte would get it back. Then Sasha would get it back. Then Charlotte eventually, then losing it to Bayley. And that's kind of when they went away with the feud. But I loved that. It felt, I loved how it just made them, feel like one-upsmanship during the title feud. A lot of people say, oh man, they just play hot potato with the belt. It doesn't make no sense. No, I look at it different. I look at it where when Sasha was good on this night, Charlotte was better. Okay, you took the title from me, but I'm better than you on this night. It's kind of like when you play a video game with your best friend, right? And you're not going to beat them every time. Sometimes they win, sometimes this one wins. Just like in sports, right? That's the reason why like the NBA Finals has game series. You don't say, oh, they're playing hot potato with who wins, and that's the way I choose to look at wrestling. On some nights, this person was better. And that's what I loved about this feud.
And thinking back too, I don't know if WWE had this in mind, but they had to establish this title differently than the past. Like it was always one woman for the most part dominated the championship scene, and the division kind of revolved around them. So especially the Divas Championship, it was AJ Lee for a long time. It was Nikki Bella for a long time. And before that, like even Maurice held a record for the longest holding the belt because it wasn't considered a competitive championship. So I feel like Charlotte and Sasha playing quote unquote hot potato in these competitive matches in a way where you can say both of them brought it one night better than the other. And then that's why that person walked out as champion. I think that's kind of was a good thing to show like, no, we have two women that are good enough. Actually, let's say three women, because Becky Lynch could have easily won that belt WrestleMania 32 as well. I know a lot of people that thought she was going to win because she was the underdog. But I think it was a good way to show like, okay, this is how we're seeing our women now. Think about how also people, wrestling fans are always complaining, but think about how exciting Raw was at that time. You were excited for the pay-per-views, but you also wanted to watch Raw because you knew that Charlotte and Sasha were going to tear the house down, reminiscent of Lita and Trish, where you can look forward to them putting on a good match and you looked forward to it. So I agree. It was great.
Absolutely. And at this time too, they're making history because this is where we got the first women's Hell in a Cell match, right? As well as Charlotte getting, her name change went down from Charlotte Flair, went to Charlotte, then she went back to Charlotte Flair. But you get in that match, Hell in a Cell, it lets you know that this feud was something serious. Of course, Sasha Banks fans will tell you they was upset because Sasha could only win the title on Raw and she could never successfully defend the title. Of course, as wrestling fans, we like to pick stuff apart. But what I did love during this title reign was, again, the one-upswomanship, right?
Yep.
Charlotte wins the title in Boston, but then Sasha wins the title in Charlotte. And I just love when they do little Easter egg stuff like that.
Same. And that, again, makes you look forward to what they're going to do with it. And even when they both won it, it just felt bigger. Like they were able to have a different outlook on and you were excited about who is going to be the next champion, like who is going to face Charlotte and Sasha next, because they were kind of the top of the division at that time. And this also goes to the short reigns that Sasha Banks has, but I think we, made arguments for why it wasn't as bad as it seemed at the time. So I love being able to look back on the start of that. And as a wrestling fan, being able to see the birth of a championship and kind of the end of that era is pretty cool as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get the four horsewomen out of the way. We talked a little bit about Sasha Banks' reigns in relation to Charlotte, but Bayley didn't come up to the main roster at the same time. So when she came up, she's this uber baby face. We don't really know how she fits on the main roster yet. Looking back on Bayley's reign prior to turning heel, you could tell it was hard to translate her babyface character onto the main roster and for her identity to not always be linked to her NXT feud with Sasha Banks. How did you feel when she finally won the title? Was she ready for it? Was it memorable?
It had that pop, because Bayley was somebody you just love, right? She was just easy to love. So I felt like, it had that pop. And the reign I felt, was 75 days, 76 days. She was somebody who was able to go into WrestleMania as champion and leave as still champion. So I thought that was cool. Especially the match, considering now, obviously, if Becky Lynch wasn't on SmackDown, it probably would have been the four horsewomen at WrestleMania, but instead they got Nia Jax, and they kind of got Nia out of the way early, and you got to see the triple threat with Sasha, Charlotte, and Bayley. But overall, I enjoyed this title run. I think that it was the right time when for her to go to SmackDown, just because she was going to kind of stay in that character doesn't really work for Monday Night Raw for too long. Raw is kind of let's be real, it's always kind of been more of the adult crowd because of the time it comes on television where, kids love wrestling, but SmackDown's easier for them to watch. It's on Friday. It's a show that they don't have to get up and go to school the next morning, So I was glad that, she had her run, but I was kind of glad when Alexa Bliss took it off of her.
Yeah. So when Bayley came up, it didn't feel it didn't have the same touch for me. So when she won it, even that WrestleMania match, to be honest with you, was kind of forgettable. And people could disagree or agree with me, I think, because there have been so many good championship matches now, especially singles matches, that I look back at these like triple threats and these fatal four ways, and it kind of feels like, okay, you just wanted to have the women on the card, but the singles feuds have outshone it so much. So thank you for bringing that back to my memory.
You thought that match was forgettable?
I don't look back on it. I don't remember it like where if I'm looking back on women's matches at Mania that I want to watch, that never pops up into my head. It's more like times like this where I'm looking at the lineage or the trajectory, like, okay, what were the women doing at each WrestleMania? That's when I be like, oh yeah, that happened.
In all fairness, though, you're not wrong.
I'm never wrong.
I think for me, it was, one, it's going to be special for me personally because that was the first women's wrestling championship match I saw at a WrestleMania, right? Because WrestleMania 28, there was none. So WrestleMania 33, that match happened first. Even though the match of the night for the women was Naomi winning the championship, the problem was that this was that second really long WrestleMania. The 1 year before 32 was like, okay, this is lengthy, but this one was like, bro, like, come on now. Seth Rollins and Triple H could have been cut in half. You had the Undertaker going down,
and just say the Undertaker, it's long. Everything long. The entrance, the match, everything.
Yeah, it should have been his last against Roman, and this is pre-Tribal Chief Roman. But, with Naomi, everything that had happened in Orlando months prior, it was like, and then, we were scared the match was going to get cut off, but thankfully we got it. But I can understand why this one kind of fell by the wayside, despite having all megastars in the match. And yes, I do think Nia Jax is a megastar.
She's 100% a megastar. Let's get into Nia Jax's ring, because I'm looking at her photo here, smiling. And it's hard to believe that at one point, Nia Jax was a baby face because she's so like hated now for whatever reason. So why did you get excited when I brought up Nia Jax as Raw Women's Champion?
Because this feud right here was everything a wrestling feud should be with her and Alexa Bliss, right? It was bullying, which means they captivated you emotionally. Now, Eric Bischoff always says it's hard to get, and I'm going to say a giant, I mean, in a very respectful way. He always says it's difficult to get heat on a giant because they don't have to cheat. They don't have to cheat to win.
Right.
But then it's also hard to get sympathy for them because, like, well, they're bigger than everybody. But Alexa Bliss found ways to hit Nia where it hurts. And that right there made her so relatable. So when she beat her at WrestleMania, and this is where a lot of times people don't give Alexa Bliss her credit. Which I know we'll get into her reigns and whatnot. But the fact that she was able to make Nia Jax such a sympathetic babyface, I thought it was done well. And where else better for Nia Jax to become champion than WrestleMania?
Right. I had mixed feelings about the feud only because I knew they were best friends. And I remember them talking about it and how hard it was to go with this storyline because Alexa Bliss dealt with body dysmorphia. She had, she dealt with a lot of her stuff. So it was very hard for her to do this storyline with Nia Jax. But in the world of wrestling, I hate to say, like, sometimes you got to cross those lines, and that's how you get the story. And it got us to be sympathetic with Nia, and she was very lovable during this time. She was very relatable. She was able to, those scenes with Alexa, like her acting like she's about to cry, she played the role of the sympathetic victim of Alexa Bliss's meanness. It also helps that Alexa, like you said, I am one that slept on her for a long time because I didn't like the way she was booked. We'll get into that. But she played that mean girl very well. Alexa has so much charisma and the potential to show whatever emotion she needs to show. So we were like hating Alexa for how she was talking to Nia. So hearing her finally beat her and also put on, I think, a pretty good match.
Yeah, it's funny because like that's one of those things where you know how you say sometimes you don't want to know things in wrestling. I think because I didn't know too much. Like I saw them being friends on Total Divas, obviously, right? But I didn't see going into this. I think I just suspended my disbelief, suspended everything I knew, so I could just fully invest in the storyline. I believe at one point Enzo Amore was involved in it, but he said like he wanted to go as far as possible to get Nia and being super loved and getting him super hated. Now, I would wonder know how you feel about this because the way he wanted to do it, that he was like, it was going to be kind of like a love triangle thing where he was going to be so into Nia Jax and then he was going to kick her to the curb and say he wanted Alexa Bliss. He was going to do the whole she's the pretty blonde and all the stereotypical stuff. And he just felt like that would have made him so hated and got Nia even loved even more. How do you feel about that?
I agree with him. That would have definitely did that. And if you're going to do it, why not do it? We've also seen those sort of romantic storylines play out to a certain extent. So I think it would have added a lot to it. And we were meant to hate Enzo. So I think it would have worked. Because my thing is, y'all went that far. Why not just, push the envelope if it especially made you sympathize with who you're meant to sympathize with? So, I mean, fuck it. Too bad Enzo is who he is, but it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea at all. I enjoyed her reign. She was only champion for 70-something days, but I did enjoy it. I thought it was a good amount of time. How do you feel about it?
It's one of those interesting. It was a good amount of time because you could start to see the novelty starting to wear off,
right?
And we saw it when the Money in the Bank happened. That cash in. How many people they was cheering Alexa Bliss? Which people are going to cheer cash in. It's the fact that because it's so the spontaneity of it, the fact that people know they're about to get a new champion in most cases, so people are always going to cheer cash in. But I felt like this was one of the moments because, you start to get Ronda Rousey involved, then everybody kind of like, all right, we already know what's going to happen. Ronda's going to win, So it was cool to get us that swerve before we went there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's get into Alexa Bliss really quick. I mentioned earlier I didn't like how she was booked before. I thought her feud with Bayley is so cringe. We talked about the dynamic of Alexa being sort of the bully and the villain, especially during this time. And Bayley was kind of casted as the victim. She's so soft and she's so sweet. And I don't think it made us feel bad for Bayley. I think it made her look a little pathetic in a way. So when she ended up losing the championship to Alexa, I was not happy. I just felt like, and then Alexa she came over and just dominated the scene. And it was more like how it was back in the Divas era where we were talking about where one woman sort of just runs everything and it's not competitive. So I didn't appreciate a lot of Alexa Bliss at the time. But I think if I was behind the scenes and I wanted to put the belt on someone that can carry the division, I can see 100% why they would choose Alexa Bliss to do it.
Oh, 100%, and she's somebody who just has a great character and she showed her range, from Little Miss Bliss in NXT to, the character she had on the main roster, on SmackDown, on Raw. She's definitely somebody that's, when I say commercially appealing, like she knows how to represent the company. She knows how to go out there and do all the PR work. So I've seen her and Nikki A.S.H when they were tag team champions working with at Johns Hopkins Children's Center. And they were sitting there for on Labor Day, they was in Baltimore and they was with the kids, and when you see wrestlers interacting with children who are sick, it's just amazing because you really see a different side of them. And you can see like when these little kids, I have a picture, I have to send it to you. These little kids had like put this little, the little hockey goal they made into like a cage, and they put Alexa Bliss and Nikki A.S.H inside of it. And they're little, so it was so funny. And you could and then they was painting nails, and that's the stuff that you see like, okay, I see why WWE goes with you. You know what I mean? Her and Braun Strowman, you could see like they have a special bond. Because both of them was there that day, and it was just funny. I remember he was sitting there like, "Hey, Lexi, make sure you book your flight."
You sound just like him.
I was like, "Hey, yo," but it was just fun watching them. And Ricochet was there as well, but just seeing them interact with the kids, and like you said, Alexa Bliss is so good; she can make you hate her. And that's why I was glad when they brought her in, like you said, with Bayley and her and Sasha. They had a good feud. Sasha took the title for only 8 days, and I know a lot of people hated that. Sasha could have held the title a little bit longer.
8 days is ridiculous. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was actually Sasha's first pay-per-view win for the title. Wow,
no wonder Sasha, the crew we've been through it.
Yeah, but overall, I thought, her and Alexa Bliss, just always, thought Alexa can work with a lot of people, and that's what I enjoyed. Even her run with her, little run with Ronda Rousey.
Her feud with Ronda was good. I want to say one last thing about Alexa Bliss is she talked about how she was sort of bullied or outcasted backstage because she was being what they say the rocket ship was put on her, and she was pushed a lot in the beginning, and it wasn't being respected because she didn't do a lot in NXT prior to her coming up, and she didn't have prior wrestling experience. So a lot of people felt like she didn't deserve the spot that she was given. There was a lot of the drama, or I would say rumors of a feud with Sasha during that time. But I think she's done a very good job of proving why she was put in that spot. And she's one of those people who, she always had her fans, but she definitely always had a lot of haters. So I think over time, we just grew respect for her. Like absence makes the heart grow fonder, because she was around so much and was always in the title picture and always the focus. I think her taking time off for whatever reason and time going by helped people kind of appreciate her more, and why she's been able to have so much range with her fans. She was able to be a despicable heel for a while. She became a baby face with Nikki, which again was not planned. Another one of those wrestling, strange couple. What do they call it? That they become the odd couple. Yes.
Yeah.
That they become good. So I want to give it up to Alexa. She at one point was the only woman that held both the SmackDown and the Women's Championships, if I'm not mistaken. And for a long time, she had the most reigns. I don't know if it was this championship or the SmackDown, but she did hold one of those records for a long time before Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch changed the fucking game. So we were talking, me and Brian H. Waters is always talking about wrestling, but we were talking about Ronda Rousey and her debut and what that meant for the company. And I know she may not be everyone's cup of tea. She's not the strongest on the mic. But at the end of the day, WWE signed Ronda Rousey. And I will always put respect on her name, because when we talked about that time in history where women were dominating sports, but she was dominating in a whole nother way that I don't think anyone saw coming. She took the world of MMA by storm. She became the face of UFC. She broke so many records being a woman in this sport, and also looking, pretty doing it. How did you feel when she came to WWE, and do you feel like they put the championship on her too soon? How do you feel about her as a champion in WWE looking back?
You signed Ronda Rousey as a WWE superstar, not somebody to come in and make a special appearance, not somebody as a guest referee, not somebody to, be a special attraction. You signed her as a WWE superstar. unless there was a pre-made feud online, you kind of had to put the title on her while she still had some buzz. Now, she was coming off of 2 losses. That's not to be ignored, right? Coming off of 2 shoot losses in UFC, where she lost to Holly Holm. That was pretty much a knockout. And she lost to Amanda Nunes. That was a knockout. But because of the way professional wrestling is, you can maneuver around that. A lot of times people like to compare her to Mike Tyson, which rightfully so. Before she even entered into the WWE, she was being compared to Mike Tyson. I remember when I was at ESPN, we was putting together content, and that was one of the things I did. I had to put together a graphic side by side because the way he was winning fights was the same way she was winning her fights. Now, the difference is Tyson came into WWE with hopes to get back to boxing, but it was like, okay, he said it best, his Hall of Fame speech. He needed WWE and they needed him. Ronda came in at a time. It's like, all right, we're going to do something different. She wrestled. And I think that what's underrated is she came in, the ladies were working with her and she was working with them. I believe it was one of the things, I'm not sure if it was on Total Divas where I saw it, or maybe it's just a social video where she said, usually she was in locker rooms where it was so competitive and everybody's working against her. Now she's in a locker room where it's like, no, we're working together. So that was the big deal. And I think with Ronda Rousey coming in at this time, it was one of the best things for her and for the company.
Agreed. And you put it right on the head where she came in and she worked with the women. And watching Total Divas later on, I learned she made an effort to do that. She made an effort she traveled the road. Ronda Rousey could have been a Brock Lesnar ass person and she could have, didn't travel and showed up when she wanted to show up. She could have did all of those things, but Ronda Rousey paid her dues. She trained with Natalya Neidhart. She got on the road. They didn't make her champion right away. They could have easily did that if they wanted to, just off the simple fact that she was Ronda Rousey. And also, not to mention, I'm always going to come from a marketing business perspective, the investment. You think it was cheap signing Ronda Rousey? I don't think so. So, of course, she was going to be the focus of the division. Of course, at some point, if she was going to be an active superstar, she was going to become champion. And it took a few months. It's not like she came in and won it. She actually had a feud with Stephanie McMahon. She mixed it up with everybody a little bit. And then she ended up becoming champion. And say what you want to say about it. I think it was going to happen regardless. I think she tried her best, but I don't think any of us were ready for the man and the star power that was going to bring. The feud that was meant to happen was always Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair, because if you were going to pin Ronda Rousey against the best of the best of the best, it was going to be Charlotte. But nobody expected Becky Lynch's star to rise in 2018 to this much. She ended up winning the Royal Rumble, Becky Lynch, in the middle of the man's rise. This is after she got her face broken in. At this point, she had held the SmackDown Women's Championship, but she was kind of floating around. She was never, I would say, a mid-carder, but she wasn't doing a lot, and the fans were always behind her, and Survivor Series season, and now going into WrestleMania 35, where Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair was going to be the first women main event of Mania. She is literally untouchable. Her star is, I can't even believe how bright it became. How did you feel about Becky Lynch's reign and her coming out of 35? Is her reign one of the most important and pivotal of this championship's lineage?
Oh, man, that's a great question. Lineage? Yeah. Because of what she did with it, right? She had important feuds. At first, it felt like it got a little slow. Let's be real, you go back to when she was defending against Lacey Evans and whatnot. So it did feel like it got a little slow. But man, as we got closer to, as we got, well into it, especially when she was getting ready to, when, Sasha comes back, we starting to see, okay, she had to kind of like dig deeper because, when you come in, you're going to get somebody who's fresh off of a return. It makes you think, wait, is this person going to come back 10 times better? But no, that wasn't the case. So I do think this was definitely pivotal because it was also established her like, all right, yeah, Ronda had the title for a long time and she had some important matches. Let's not act like, matches with Nikki Bella, matches with Charlotte that wasn't necessarily for the title, but, just matches to establish, the Survivor Series match, right? But I thought Becky was like, because she was homegrown, I thought it was definitely, and especially considering where we saw her kind of get knocked down and then come back up. Because before, like you said, it was Alexa Bliss who had the lineage of everything. But yeah, I think this was probably the most pivotal as to really establish like, okay, we really taking this title seriously.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up her reign because there was a lot of Becky Lynch's reign initially coming out at 35 that was kind of corny. She feuded with Lacey Evans. That was, I think, her first feud after that. So Charlotte, of course. So it kind of started off slow. You're right. I think they didn't know what to do with Becky, so they were kind of doing everything with her because she was so hot and they wanted her on TV all the time. But initially, I wasn't really feeling a lot of it. I wanted her to drop it, to be completely honest with you. I hate double champions in the women's division because they already don't get enough attention, but then you put them both on one person, that does such a disservice to like 75% of the roster because you eliminate any involvement that they can have in the championship because it's all dominated by one person who we know isn't going to lose at this point. So to me, it makes the division stale. So I'm glad that she ended up dropping it at some point, but I think this might be the most important reign just of the history of her holding it, her walking out of Mania, the double champion, and just becoming the star that she was. I look at this graphic of her holding it as the man, and she held it very well. Let's put it that way.
I got to ask you this question. Did you like the way she lost the SmackDown Women's title? Because you don't like double champions, just like me. Do you like the way it went down as far as her losing the championship?
I do.
Okay.
I wish like Lacey Evans, like the people involved were bigger stars because then it would have felt more, you know what I mean? Like now it just seems like, okay, yeah, that happened. And because WWE has revisionist history, we're not going to see that.
Yeah.
So it just kind of was like, well, I was happy, but it was also like, okay. That's that.
Yeah, because like I remember like when she had the match with Charlotte, and I was like, okay, she's going to defend both titles. Good, that's what I wanted to see. Didn't want to see the whole undisputed thing, but like you said, I think it would have been a bigger deal if she beat Sasha Banks for one and lost to Charlotte, because it would have been like a sure enough weakening up.
Right.
But I definitely enjoyed. I'm glad it, went down that way. I think the biggest problem though, like you said, with Lacey Evans kind of being that first feud, when you think about like a guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin, right? When he finally got to the mountaintop, he had heavy hitters to work with when he first won the title. You talking Mick Foley, his first two title defenses, well, he was Dude Love, but he was still a heavy hitter. He's the guy who gets you ready for the main event or makes you seen as established guy. Then he went against Kane. Then it was The Undertaker. You know what I mean? So even though he went on this reign of terror before he becoming champion, the same way Becky Lynch did, it's like when he finally won the belt, he still had bigger fish to fry. And I think that's where it was hard because Becky didn't have a lot of people that she like. Imagine if her feuds would have been, let's say, Nia Jax, then Asuka. You know what I mean? And we probably would have looked at it differently.
I completely agree with you. And I think that all goes down to the problems and how the women's division is always being looked at. Because what other heavy hitters were there besides the Four Horsewomen that really would have made sense? And that goes to just how everyone was booked at the time. Because the man started with Nia Jax. Easily could have went that way, but they chose to. I think they thought Becky Lynch's rub was going to rub off on Lacey Evans, but it just was kind of a flop. Her feud with Sasha Banks, I think, was amazing. It got to a point where I was ready for her to drop it. She had held it for so long. Like, she had the record. It was like, okay, when are we going to see more of the women's division? So we go to 2020. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so nobody really knows what's going to happen in the world, but we were lucky enough to get wrestling every week. Becky was champion, so she was feuding with Shayna Baszler. And I wanted this to be Shayna's moment. Becky even wanted it to be Shayna's moment. I have a theory, and I don't know if it was, I don't know if you told me that it was said or not, but I think if there was a crowd, Becky would have lost just because of how they were booking Shayna at one point. And Becky thought that it was time for that. But they kept it on her, I think, for the safe choice, being that there was a pandemic. They got to, go with what was safe. But then we get Money in the Bank. And this is the first one that's in WWE headquarters, which was super fun. I don't know how everyone else felt about it, but I enjoyed it. I love how innovative WWE is when it comes to, all right, let's pivot towards something else. And they did, and it was awesome. Kind of find out Asuka wins, thankfully, but the next night on Raw, we learned that in the briefcase, there is not a contract. It is the Raw Women's Championship that Becky shares that she's pregnant. So she's going to be taking time off. And this is how Asuka becomes the Raw Women's Champion. And I know that this is a very polarizing topic, but how did you feel about this? Did Asuka deserve a better win than being handed the championship by Becky? What were your thoughts?
Hindsight is always 2020. When this happened, it was like, congratulations, Becky. Okay, this is how they're doing this. Interesting. I think I didn't really care for it, but I loved the run and the feuds that would come afterwards. You know what I mean? But I didn't like the fact that it was just kind of handed to her. I think if I was, put on, my booking hat, I probably would have still, maybe had another ladder match or another fatal 4-way match of some sort. And then Asuka giving an argument like, well, I'm Money in the Bank holder. And then just because I would have wanted to see Asuka with that briefcase. You imagine like how fun it would have been watching her.
I was so looking forward to that. Because if you listen to our platform, I always talk about how disappointed I am that ever since Carmella, the cash-ins are either the night of or something like this. We never get to see someone carry it. And I think it could do so much for that talent. Like, look what it did to Carmella. She made it a part of her fucking gimmick. And we were entertained by it all the time. The fake cash-ins, and Asuka's so funny and has so much personality. I was looking forward to that. But there was also a side of me who always felt like Asuka didn't get the whatever she deserved, even to this day, to be honest with you. I was happy just to see the championship on her, as crazy as that sounds.
Nah, and it was like, I don't know. It's unfortunate because she's a 3-time champion, but one, she's never won it in the United States, if we be real. Because the first few times,
realize that.
Yeah, the first time she's won, it was, and this is the SmackDown title, but the Raw title. Or the first time she won was the first two. She was handed it. The second time it was in the Thunderdome when she beat Sasha. And then now she won it in, Saudi Arabia. But it would have been nice to see her kind of have that death-defying, crowd loud moment,
Do you think that is intentional or is just like a coincidence?
Honestly, think it's a coincidence. Just looking at everything, looking at the title reigns.
Yeah.
I think Asuka may be... I think now we're going to start to see a different side of Asuka because I feel like this regime may let her spread her wings a little bit more. I've already found ways of like, okay, well, what if Asuka lost this way? Because I want to see Trish Stratus with the championship. But, I do think that she will, I think she will find she'll be treated better this go round, because of the history and the history that she has and the lineage she has just in her, in the business as far as Kana. We've been saying, especially in our group chat, Asuka Kana is coming. Asuka Kana is coming. Asuka Kana is here. So that's here. Yeah, and that's what I'm excited for, to see how this title reign goes.
I am too. And her reigns are good in a way that we got really good matches out of them. I think about her feuding with Sasha Banks.
Oh my God.
And even like Bailey in that era, and the pandemic era, the Thunderdome era, I guess you want to call it. Asuka was one of the true MVPs.
Thank you.
I enjoy. She held the tag team championship and the world championship at one point. Like, she was doing her thing. I hate that she didn't have a crowd, and that weird coincidence kind of sucks too. But I love that we can look back and say like Asuka was a former Raw Women's Champion, because for a long time it didn't seem like she was going to be put on that platform again. She's always kind of never reaching exactly where we all know she deserves to be. And I hate using the word deserve in wrestling, but she is one of the greatest women's wrestlers of all time. And her fans know what it is to have her on this roster, and to not have her as one of the main people is kind of crazy, but I think they're going another way with her. A lot of people argue that she could be the fifth horsewoman when you just think about dependable workers. And just that crowd. That's an interesting question. Like, who would be considered the fifth horsewoman of WWE, especially in hindsight now that the landscape is so different. But shout out to Asuka. Let's move on to Rhea Ripley. Her Raw Women's Championship reign, to me, was super forgettable. I was not sold on Rhea Ripley after she lost to Charlotte at WrestleMania 36. I thought that completely killed her momentum. I was like, it has to take a lot for me to even look at her in this way again. She did end up having her WrestleMania moment and winning the championship. How did you feel about her little less than 100-day reign, Rhea Ripley as Raw Women's Champion?
Wow, one, I think it's very interesting what you just said there, as far as it taking a while for you to take her seriously, because I'm like, wow, I kind of agree. When this happened, I think they did everything they could to make us feel like, oh shoot, she's a big deal. You remember she popped up on Raw and she just beat up Asuka and was like, and then challenged her, said, yeah, I'm ready for you, whatever, right? The match, I don't think it was a squash match, but it kind of, like, in hindsight, when you think about it, like, that's honestly the least memorable match from that WrestleMania. And obviously with Sasha and Bianca, that was just in a different world of its own. Right. But also the women's tag team turmoil, because it felt like the tag titles were being taken seriously for a change.
Right.
But I felt like they showed us this dominance. Honestly, the dominance we get now. I felt like this time was a preview of it, but then she just got fed to Charlotte again.
Right.
And that's what killed it. You know what I mean? Yeah, she had it for 98 days, but it was like, But also, maybe Rhea, in all fairness, maybe Rhea hadn't found herself fully yet. Like, we got to remember, Rhea Ripley's not 27.
No, I think she's only like 26. So at this time, she's even like, what, 23, 24?
Yeah. So it's still a lot. Like, I thought she was a great UK Women's Champion and NXT Women's Champion. But we got to also look at it like this, right? Now she's on the big leagues. The crowds are bigger. The moments are bigger. So she had to make the adjustments. But I thought as NXT Women's Champion, especially for her to take out Shayna Baszler, it felt like a big deal. And we wasn't getting that yet. But that's the beauty of watching these wrestlers grow. It's like you get to see them make their waves. So that's why, like, I understand, like, this reign, honestly, it was important for her career and her lineage, but it was also pivotal because she could see, all right, this is where what not to do. And that's the reason why I really enjoyed her match. I know we'll probably talk about it another time, but that's why I really enjoyed her match with Charlotte Flair, because you really saw all of that was the building of what we get today from Rhea Ripley.
I agree. And I never was really worried about Rhea because she was so young and she had time to kind of reinvent herself, which she did. And holding the championship isn't an easy thing. Like, it's a lot of pressure. It's not just a fucking accessory to these people. When you win the championship in WWE, you are the face of the division. You have to go make those media appearances. You have to kind of be the brand ambassador for that. And not everyone's always ready when they get that opportunity. We talked about somebody like, let's say, Lacey Evans that got the rocket ship put on her back early, and she clearly wasn't ready for it. So for Rhea Ripley to even do what she did and be able to kind of recover from that, where now when I think about her, I don't even remember this era for the most part. Now I remember her with Judgment Day and what she's doing with the SmackDown Women's Championship. But Rhea has it all. I'm sure this isn't going to be the last time she wins the Raw Women's Championship, or, whichever gold she can hold at the time. Let's move on to one of the shortest reign, actually, was Nikki A.S.H. So how did you feel about her character to begin with? I was introduced to Nikki on social media for the most part because I wasn't watching NXT a lot, but her work with, what was their faction called? NXT, where she was like the crazy one and she was doing all that cool shit with Zelina's husband. Sanity?
Sanity. Okay. I'm looking right at it and I can't even call it, but
yeah. So I remember
they had dope music,
right? And the whole aura, and I thought she played that role so well that kind of off the cut, I don't know what world she lives in, but she was so captivating and she was a really good wrestler. And when she came up to the main roster, and they did a lot of funny stuff with her. There's a lot of exclusive web content with Nikki when she first came to the main roster that was really good and really promising. I thought they were going to do a lot with her. But they didn't. She did end up tag teaming with Alexa Bliss for a while, and fans liked her, but they never really pushed it. Then she came up with this superhero character, which was her idea, surprisingly, and it's stuff that Vince eats up. Kids liked it. As far as wrestling Twitter, it did not go over well. You have a daughter. How did you kind of feel about Nikki A.S.H? And do you think her winning the briefcase and cashing in and becoming champion, were you into it?
I loved it. So, full disclosure, I wouldn't say we're friends at all, but I knew her from, shout out to my boy Blake, right? She hooked us up with tickets to, it was one Father's Day weekend for an NXT show. And we got to go backstage getting to talk to her. I saw how she's a bubbly person. And I mentioned earlier about her at the hospital during her tag team title run. So when I see Nikki A.S.H, the first thing I thought of, because I saw the Nikki Cross character and I'm like, okay, she's walking around, she's crazy, this, that, and the other. Wow, she's so good at what she does. She knows how to turn it on, turn it off. You know what I mean? But when I saw this, I was like, oh, this fits her personality because she's that fun type person that little kids would love. And so when I saw this, I remember I was on social media defending it, y'all don't understand. This is, like you said, Vince McMahon eats up that shit. But this is also one of those things where it's there's always room for superheroes in wrestling. We saw it with Hurricane. We saw it with Mighty Molly. It just is because it's professional wrestling. It's gimmicky. It's for kids. At the end of the day, right? WWE's target demographic, the where they make their most money is with children. That's what people forget, because if you and I go to a show, that's 2 tickets. But let's just say, you say, look, I'm going to take my nephews to a show. So now you done bought, that's 3 tickets because you got to go. You know what I mean? If I take my kids and let's say we all all right, let's all link up. That's 6 tickets versus 2 tickets.
Right.
You know what I mean? Plus merch. Because most of the time,
your kid don't want that superhero mask, that cape, all of that.
And think about it, when we in there, we might be ready to buy, but it's, you know what? I'm gonna go on www.shop.com. I can wait. Most of the time with kids, they want to have something. I got free tickets to SmackDown one time and still ended up spending $100 because I bought merch. I bought and I know better. I bought the freaking titles for my kids, the little fake, the little foam ones, because they wanted to have it in their hands at the show. It's a difference. So, like you said, with those little masks that Nikki A.S.H has, you remember when the New Day had those light up unicorns? My son had one, and guess what? It died that night. Didn't even light up no more. But that's the thing. So I love this.
Place for it for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a place for it. I thought, honestly, the championship was really just to get the big pop. I never thought Nikki A.S.H was going to have a long title run. I thought, what was it, 70-something days? I thought that was longer than what I expected.
It was, I think, 33 days.
Oh, 33 days.
So a little over a month.
Right. That was fine, because like when they introduced the hardcore, when they introduced the 24/7 championship, that was for Nikki A.S.H.
Right.
Even though she was the last one and she threw it away, but that was the title for her. So, but overall, I mean, it was still great that she was able to show her fans, the kids, that guess what? Superheroes can win the championship too.
Yeah.
Especially, she cashed in on Charlotte? Yeah, cashing in on Charlotte. So I thought it was great. It was
cashes in on Charlotte because she's always the champion. So chances are that's who you're going to be cashing in on. But like you said, it was for the pop. It was fun for the kids. And next, not the last person, but the most historic reign, I think, and just one that touched all of our hearts was Bianca Belair.
Yes, indeed.
She held that title so well with so much pride. She defended it in good matches. Is she kind of one of your favorite? Because I think she's probably one of my favorites to hold.
Instantly. Absolutely. I mean, we're talking all the media appearances, the Kevin Hart show. I mean, come on. Like, Bianca made that title feel like the most important title in professional wrestling, as she should. And what made this so special, no offense to the first title run, right? Because the first title run, it was about, to me, this is my opinion, it was about us getting that moment with her and Sasha in the ring. The title run was cool, but it was also in front of the Thunderdome. Like, they didn't go back out in front of fans till after SummerSlam anyway, or right before SummerSlam. But this right here, because everybody got to be a part of the chase with her for it, when she had to, chase after Becky, when she kind of, got knocked back down, had to come back up, being the sole survivor at Survivor Series, going into the Royal Rumble, coming up short, but going into the Elimination Chamber. So that right there, seeing the chase, and then her holding on to it, because no matter what, as long as she was champion, she, people like to compare her to John Cena and call her Gene Cena. I can understand that. The difference is, the difference is that it felt like a lot of those titles, the way the feuds was, she could lose. We could see her losing to Bayley. We could see her losing to Becky Lynch at SummerSlam last year. She was like, nah, this is my redemption story. Like, every time she went into these feuds, it was with a purpose. It was, holding on to the championship, holding on to the thing that's bringing her the most money. But it was also like a purpose. And I thought that's what made the championship well. It never felt like a prop.
Never. And like I said, she always defended it with everything in her. Like, you can just tell, like, she works hard. And just seeing her with this title, just is like, oh, it was such a time for her. And I can't help but bring up, the fact that Krista B and I held it really quick. Like, I mean, yeah, but yeah, she did her thing with it. She made me care about it again. When Becky was holding it, I was bored. And then Asuka and Sasha was awesome. Everything that Sasha did with it was great after that. And then with Rhea and Nikki, it was like, okay, but Bianca put that respect back on it. And I was happy to see her win it. I was happy to see her hold it for as long as she did. And there were times, yes, where I was rooting for some of her challengers because that made it fun for me. Going back to Charlotte and Sasha holding it, it was like exactly what I like to see. Watching a competitive match, not knowing who's going to walk out champion, and the people in the match are both strong contenders.
I'll say this though. As much as like I understand exactly where you're coming from, and as much as I do like hot potatoes with the belt sometimes, because she doesn't have, like, to me, Bianca doesn't have that feud just yet of who's her
one.
Yeah, I think we're still waiting for that defining opponent for her. You could some people would say it's Becky Lynch, and I could understand that, but like Sasha Charlotte, they always gonna be tied together, right? Like John Cena, Randy Orton, Trish and Lita. I don't know who Bianca's is yet. Maybe you have somebody to pencil in. But because No, I was gonna say because we don't have that just yet. I was fine with the title run, and seeing the bigger picture, her being the longest Black champion in WWE history, her having a long, lengthy run in general, her knocking down all challengers. I was fine with that. Like hindsight being 2020, I'm glad it happened the way it did, as opposed to racking up a bunch of title reigns. But I'm not gonna lie and say I wouldn't be mad if that would happen either. What we got, Sasha Banks was a 5-time Raw Women's Champion, so. Either way, I'm fine. But overall, shout out to her. To me, she's the greatest Raw Women's Champion ever.
I agree with you. That was actually going to be my last question, but I'm going to have to agree just for everything she did with the title. And I want to just say, wow, the true end of an era. This was the main title. I don't know how you feel, but I think there always has to be one over the other. And I think Raw was considered the main title. And when you look back at some of the people that's held it, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, Bayley, Alexa Bliss, Nia Jax, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, Asuka, Rhea Ripley, Nikki A.S.H, Bianca Belair, and that's a good lineup right there.
I understand where you're coming from, and I'm definitely deferring to you as you being, my favorite women's wrestling expert. I always felt that WWE did a better job with the women as far as the titles feeling equally important.
1,000%.
I've always felt when whatever title was on Raw with the men, right? As much as people would have wanted to believe that when Triple H was the world heavyweight champion, they still would have wanted to believe that the WWE title, just on the simple fact that the name WWE was the most important title. You could make an argument, but yeah, Brock Lesnar was the most dominant, but Triple H was the most known in 2002, in 2003 when they gave him the title, right? That's the reason why when finally they put it on Cena, it's like, nope, we're switching shows. But I felt that with the Raw title and the SmackDown Women's title, I've always felt like they were equal. I never felt that, like, say when Naomi was champion, I never felt that she was the secondary. That's why, like, when it was Ronda versus Charlotte, it felt like they were always on even playing field. So that's the way I always felt. But I can understand why you say that.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that, I do agree. I do feel like it was on equal playing fields. And one thing that was excited coming back into wrestling around 2016, 2017, and because of how the women are booked in general, like each title change felt important. Like it felt like, oh my God, like who is going to be the next champion? It was a big deal. Unlike the men to a certain extent, like, of course you're excited. I'm not saying that you're not going to be excited about who becomes the new men's champion, but with the women, it meant more. These are new champions. This is the first time where we're actually getting hard-hitting competitive feuds. You can remember every single time a new women's champion was crowned with this title because of the simple fact that it just meant so much.
Yep.
And I am grateful that I got to kind of see this reign like live in person, if that makes sense, because it's not like I'm going back and looking at, a championship where like I wasn't born when it began. Like I remember when this was like born. Like I remember when it was being debuted. I remember every single reign for the most part because it was so exciting to see.
Yep.
For sure.
Absolutely. What did you...
Go ahead, Brian.
Now, I was just saying, when you look back at just like you said, you got back in around 2017, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was your thoughts when you first saw the way the championship looked compared to the way it looked before when you, stepped away from wrestling?
I was impressed.
Okay.
Because it went back to the not being considered divas and being considered superstars. That meant so much to me as a lifelong wrestling fan who was just simply impressed that the women were even being presented in that way, were even having competitive matches and then being referred to as superstars. It was such a big moment for me. So the fact that people hate that it's just the same as the men's, even, the new ones that are coming out. But I kind of seen why that needed to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. Did you like the design?
Oh, absolutely. I love the way the colors were. I kind of wish... So part of me wanted them to have like a different belt for each. One look for Raw, one for SmackDown, but I kind of understood the whole red and blue of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I do wish they would have had a different belt for I wish they would have brought the Evolution belt back out.
Oh, that belt was so gorgeous. Like, it was beautiful. That blue. If they brought that color back, and it was so unique and it was feminine without being too, like, it wasn't pink, but it still had this softness to it, and it still looked like, a competitive championship. Like, you're so right about that. I do miss that. I think I like what this belt represented.
And I do love that they make a pink one for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And
that's
they give it for the charity. I love that.
Me too. I do too. And the branding of it all.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
But yeah, definitely Raw Women's Championship. It's crazy that we seen the beginning and the end. Mm-hmm. But it's always exciting when there's new championships. I know
100%.
that those Wrestling Girls Twitter account has been very on the necks of WWE as far as the titles changing. Like, okay, how long is the Raw belt going to be on SmackDown? Yeah, and a lot of people have been that way. But I was wondering the same thing. But I was like, I had a feeling, I was like, they're going to do something. So we're going to see. That's the beauty of wrestling. I really feel like we're starting to really see things. I know it's always cute to say the Triple H era and this, that, and the other. But there was so much, like, if we really think about like wrestling, like, all right, he got in charge literally right before SummerSlam, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by then you're already thinking about WrestleMania. Like, I listened to this interview with Paul Heyman, and he says his thing has always been, all right, tell me what we're doing at WrestleMania so we can figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
And now it seems like, okay, now we're finally getting the refresher. And yeah, they're already thinking about next year's WrestleMania. But now it seemed like, you imagine if they would have changed the titles at Survivor Series. It was like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to change this, we're going to change that. It's like you still got to like ease your way into everything. So I think it was good timing, especially because around this time of year, you're always looking for something to keep the fans engaged. Mm-hmm. So ending the lineage of the Raw Women's Championship is a good time because now, while fans are going to start to go out and, the NBA Finals is coming to a conclusion, they're like, wait, I still want to watch wrestling because they're still doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, they are. It was fun looking back on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invite. I definitely appreciate it.
Oh, of course. I always loved your perspective on women's wrestling.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
I wanted to have some random content on this, the new era that's going to be beginning with everything more into the Triple H era, as we would say. But this was great, Brian H. Waters. You can actually catch him every Wednesday on TWG Fan Club. He's part of the crew. He's actually the producer of that show. Thank you for all you do on it. But where can everyone else find you?
Well, like you said, on Fan Club, right in the middle of my day. Before Fan Club is Wednesday Worldwide on The Ringer. After Fan Club is the Wrestling Realm on the Wrestling Realm YouTube channel and Twitch channels. And, of course, Brian H. Waters. You search me on Twitter, you'll see everything, which includes everything I just named, and Breaking Through Glass Ceilings.
Yes, you have a lot going on always. He sometimes says Google him. No, not a lot of people can say that and everything comes up. But you can Google Brian H. Waters and see everything that he's up to, which is a lot. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Those Wrestling Girls. I want to shout out Krista B. I want to thank you for supporting our Patreon. We always love creating more wrestling content for you, especially exclusively. It's $1 a month. Tell your friends, subscribe to Patreon. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have new episodes coming out every Monday on YouTube and our podcast platforms. And on that note, we are out.